believed that God could do absolutely anything. He could find my stuffed animal that I lost out in the rain, or he could heal my cousin who had cancer. I had no doubt, and I completely expected every single time I prayed that he would answer my prayers. But as I got older, I started trying to handle things on my own. I wanted to, raise enough money for school. I wanted to get better by myself, just taking NyQuil or something, and I stopped having faith in God. As ministry people, we are going to be constantly surrounded by God's power and God's faith and providence. But a lot of times, we'll get to the point where we will just want to handle it on our own because it's not a big deal. We can do it by ourselves. We don't need God to take care of it. Gehazi was a servant of Elisha, and so he was constantly surrounded with all these miracles that God was doing through Elisha's ministry. And he was constantly, shown the power of God. And yet, when he was given opportunities to express his faith and do miracles, he failed over and over again. When we are given the opportunity to step outside ourselves and be a minister of God's miracles, we can't expect to do it on our own. We can't expect to be able to work that miracle by ourselves. We have to put complete faith in God. My goal today is to tell you a story that will remain in your mind, and that will remind you throughout your ministry to have faith in God. No matter what, he can change the course of history. I want you to learn to not be a Gehazi. I want you to have faith in God. Matthew 17:20 tells us that faith, even as small as a mustard seed, can work miracles. It can do things as powerful as move a mountain from one place to another. Now, the story of Gehazi has three specific ways that tell us to have faith in God. The first is to have faith in God that he will heal. In 2 Kings 4:8-37, we hear the story of the Shunammite woman who wanted to have a child, basically. She and her husband had supported Elisha in his ministry. They had given him a room that anytime he was in town, he could stay there. They had given him food. And he went to this woman and said, within a year, you are going to have a child. And she sat there and she was like, okay, you can't tell me that. I have finally come to expect that I'm not going to be a mother, and that's okay with me. You can't just tell me something like that. Within a year, she had a child, and she was shocked, and she had this amazing faith in Elisha. However, as the child grew up, and he was still young, he died in his mother's arms. And so she still had faith in the power of Elisha because he had told her she was going to have a son, and she did. And so she took off and followed Elisha and said, hey, what's going on? Like, you told me that I would have this son, and I told you, do not tempt me with this. Like, I don't need this, and I'm okay with not having it, but you gave it to me, and now you took it away. And Elisha, just kind of seeing her pain, said, all right, and sent his servant Gehazi and said, go lay your staff on her son. And 2 Kings 4:31 says, Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the boy. But there was no sound or response. So Gehazi went back and told Elisha, the boy is not awakened. Elisha went to the Shunammite's home, closed himself in the room with the son, laid on him multiple times, and eventually the boy sneezed, and he woke up. Gehazi had gone and tried to heal the boy, but he didn't succeed. And, we find throughout situations in the Bible that the reason things don't happen is because we don't have faith. My sister is a missionary to the Dominican Republic. She has had medical problems throughout her life and has gotten to the point that the doctors told her, you will never have a child. It's just not going to happen. Give up. In 2003, she got married, and she had to face that. She said, well, I'm not supposed to have a kid, but I really want one. And so she prayed and prayed and prayed, and she and her husband tried everything. They did in vitro fertilization, they did artificial insemination, and nothing happened. They had spent thousands and thousands of dollars that are hardships on normal families, but this is a missionary couple that has no income hardly. And nothing happened. They were very unsuccessful, and she was so disappointed and distressed. And they thought about adoption, and it just wasn't something they wanted to do. They really thought they wanted a child. About a year ago, my sister found out she was pregnant. She has a son. His name is Ethan. He's adorable. He's starting to walk right now. He's just the cutest little thing in the world. But he is a complete miracle. When the doctors delivered Ethan, he had to be delivered through C-section, and they got to see the state that her body was in. And the doctor actually came out and talked to my dad, and he said, there's no way that that child is here today. There is no way that that child was conceived. There is no way that that child made it through the 9-month term. And yet, he is there. We see him every day. We see him dancing to the music. We see him watching TV and chasing after remote controls because he loves them. He is real, and he is a reflection of God's power and miraculous ability. I also want you to know that Gehazi tells us to have faith that God will provide. In 2 Kings 5, you hear the story of the Armenian captain Naaman. He went to Elisha to be healed from leprosy, and Elisha said, go wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and Naaman was like, ew, that's so gross. He's like, why couldn't they wash in like a clean river? But he went, he had faith, and he washed 7 times, and he was completely purified. And he came back to Elisha and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. What can I give you? Can I give you anything? And he had brought stuff, to pay for this miraculous healing. But Elisha said, no, I'm not going to get paid for this. This is God's work. And Naaman went away. And in 2 Kings 5:20, it says, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, man of God, said to himself, my master was too easy on Naaman, this Armenian, by not accepting from him what he brought. Surely as the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something. Naaman was totally eager to give Gehazi the money and the different supplies that he had asked for. He had just been healed from leprosy. But when Gehazi came back, Elisha said, hey, where were you? What were you doing? And Gehazi was like, I did nothing. I don't know what you're talking about. I did nothing. And Elisha said, no, you got money, and I didn't want that. And actually cursed him with leprosy, not only for him, but also for his descendants. Gehazi was worried that they wouldn't make it. He was worried about money. He was worried about clothes. He was worried about support. They were on the mission field. They were traveling around to different places. And he said, hey, well, this is an opportunity for me to get the money for us. Why not take it? He wasn't having faith in God to support them. I was looking online for different stories about, pastors and the miracles that they have, and you hear stories about different pastors who aren't going to make ends meet, and a box of food shows up on their door. That's a common story that you hear. I've heard it probably 3 or 4 times throughout my life. However, I found this story that just shocked me, and I could not believe it. It is a story about these evangelism teams from Europe who went to Scotland, and they were challenged to go on a 4-week mission to Scotland, bring £1, which is about $1.63. Bring £1, go. You need to pay for your own housing, your own food, your own facilities that you're using, and your own advertisement. However, you are not allowed to ask for money. You are not allowed to mention your financial state, and you're not allowed to pass offering buckets around. That's not okay. You also have to pay back your £1 when you get back. Absolutely impossible. You're spending a month in a different country ministering. You're not allowed to ask for money, and you have to pay them back. Absolutely impossible. There are 2 different groups that went on this trip. One of them had about 5 different guys on it, and miraculous things happened. They would receive money from their parents in the mail. Their parents had no idea what was going on. They would also receive money from the churches that they had visited prior in the ministry. And they always got these notes with it saying, we know you don't actually need money, because if you did, you would have said so. But God just wouldn't let me go to sleep tonight without sending you this. I don't know why. And they received money and support through things like eggs. At one point in time, they got 600 eggs. And so they had eggs for breakfast, they had eggs for lunch, they had eggs for dinner, they had eggs for their snacks, and they even had eggs for dessert. They had eggs like crazy, to the point where they didn't even want to look at a chicken. It just made them sick. But they had protein, and they had food. They were never hungry. It supported them. Not only did they go through this entire trip and never ask for money and never take collections, but they paid a tithe immediately after receiving any gift. When they returned back after their month, they came back with 10 extra pounds. It's not a ton of money, but they came back with a surplus. This other trip that went, they kept silent about their financial needs. However, they didn't pay their tithe immediately.